Surprise, surprise, Hasbro has confirmed that Universes Beyond is not going anywhere. We got our Q3 earnings report for Hasbro yesterday, and of course, Wizards of the Coast continues to make the majority of profit for the company. But in the Q3 earnings call itself, we got a lot of great tidbits from CEO Chris Cocks talking about the future of Universes Beyond. He talks about how the current sets and the implementation of it are great, it's bringing new players and keeping players going, but in today's video, I wanted to take that line and extrapolate it a little bit further, take a look at 2027, as well as some of the trends that we already have with our current Universes Beyond product and how we can actually better predict what would be a good Universes Beyond product if there is one. There ultimately are IPs and sets that would best resonate for Magic players. It may not be Rick Grimes and Transformers or My Little Pony, but it may actually be the high fantasy and fantasy elements that already exist in the game, just in different IPs. These earning calls for Hasbro are so great in terms of the information that we get and next steps. A lot of things get said by Chris Cocks, and we can take a look at the numbers to really inform us on where we will probably see this game go, not only in the next year, because we have a lot of that information, but where we'll see this game in 2027 and potentially in 2028, as well as how we're informed as to WOTC's direction for 2026. We know what's upcoming, but how is WOTC strategically thinking about all this? We're going to break that all down and some future predictions in this video, as mentioned. Hasbro reported Q3 results a few minutes ago. This was just yesterday. Magic still killing it. Overall, Hasbro reported an operating profit of $342 million. Sorry. So $340 million, just making a nice round number, right? For the quarter, with 250, approximately, it's 251.1. I'm just using approximate numbers here. Coming from Wizards. Almost 70% of the profit made by Hasbro in Q3 was Wizards of the Coast. Absolute cinema. Shout out to Magic the Gathering for holding up shareholders. Consumer products at $80 million and entertainment at 7.5. Good Lord. So the analysis done by Saffron Olive and the MTG Goldfish team in a video, we talked about it already, seems to be following true for its trend. But in this Q3 report, we also got a bit of an update. And so we're going to kind of listen through that right now because it's about a minute long and we have a lot of information to glean through this.
And then I think like the last one is Universes Beyond is just working. The whole theory of the business was it's going to increase our distribution. It's going to increase our number of active players. It's going to bring in new fans that were adjacent to Magic. And so some of these metrics, for those of you who don't know from an LGS perspective, at least from what I understand from the LGSs I speak with, these numbers are being tracked through that companion app. So if you sign up for an event through a companion app, now there are ways to track that through Commander. If you are a new player, you are a first-time registration. If you are a returning player, someone who's coming back over and over again, and a franchise player, you are someone that is showing up to events consistently and or the same event consistently through that companion app. And so I imagine for many of you, your LGS is probably pushing that in many ways. Hey, open up your companion app, register here, scan this QR code, whatever it is, because they need to report these numbers to Wizards of the Coast. And Universes Beyond is showing that post Universes Beyond, especially within the pre-releases or the early months or whatever, that is when the data is going to be the strongest. People are coming back. New players are registering for Commander. People are coming in for pre-release for the first time, making accounts and everything. So that's where they're getting their new player numbers. And the consistency is rising up. More people are coming to play to events. Now, they're not being specific on events. It doesn't necessarily mean that more people are coming to play Standard. More people are coming to play Modern. It's just people are being more consistent. And again, now, especially at the LGSs I go to, they're asking me to scan for, Commander events when I go to play Commander. That is a way to track not only new players coming in, but people coming in more consistently, people getting more involved, those new players sticking around. And so that's how that metric is being tracked, in my opinion, or at least from my experience. Just worked. Like basically every set we've done at Universes Beyond has set records in terms of new player engagement, in terms of search queries, in terms of number of people who are going into stores, in terms of...
And so search queries, for those of you not maybe in the internet advertising space or like well aware of it, I mean, you're watching a YouTube video right now, so you probably have some general inkling of it, but that is just queries or where they appear in SEO searches on Google, Bing, whatever it is, right? Like these online website platforms, whether that be maybe searches through Amazon to buy Magic products, or going on like Walmart or something to buy product, or just to your LGS, searching it up on Google, like Final Fantasy X Magic the Gathering, Final Fantasy Magic the Gathering, MTG, Doctor Who, whatever it is, right? All of these have increased dramatically as per what they're looking for, and that increases their traffic. It allows the SEO marketing of their websites and their relevant pages to be more successful, and that's going to be an important metric for all the advertisers. So we know that advertising is such a dominant thing in the space right now for internet media and just media in general. We've been seeing ad placements for everything, so ads are going to be a central piece of all of this, especially with Hasbro really using Wizards of the Coast, as we see, as a primary revenue generator. That query portion actually more important than people are giving it credit for.
Of sales in non-traditional outlets like mass and convenience for us, and we don't see that slowing down. If anything, I think there's potential to accelerate it just with the quality of partners we have next year.
Accelerate? Hold on. I don't think we need more in-universe sets. Hold on. What are we talking about here? Maybe it's just more secret layers. And
the early reads we're getting on those partners. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Marvel superheroes, The Hobbit, Star Trek, which for a big nerd like myself is near and dear to my heart. I think all of those have
something in mind. And actually, I'm gonna link it down below. I don't want to like do multiple reacts here, but Saffron Olive actually did a TikTok video, a short form video of a longer clip of this, where they actually talk about a set that they believe will actually make a big, if not equal to bigger impact than the Final Fantasy set. That's actually just after this clip. So it looks like Saffron Olive just kind of clipped this portion. I'm going to link that short form video down below. But there's a lot to kind of glean from this. So Chris Cocks aware of what's going on with these sets, especially because these are primary drivers for profit, not even just revenue, for Wizards of the Coast along with Hasbro. So it's going to be important to understand their strategic value that they've placed onto these products and where they want to take them. So I want to link this. Mike Preventure has honestly been a great person to just find like the Q3 earning call summary. So I just want to kind of highlight this. Go to this, share this. This is something that Mike's been doing. I think the summary is actually great, and it does go over not only the information we just saw in this clip, but a little bit more as well in terms of the numbers, who was there, what they kind of generally spoke about. So I highly recommend you check this out if you wanted a little bit more nitty gritty, but still within like a TLDR type of speak here. But Hasbro CEO Chris Cocks on University Beyond IPs, they pretty much have their pick of partners. If you can conceive of a collaboration, we can do it with Magic, where we have already inked a deal or have conversations for a deal. I think we're still in the early timings of what Universes Beyond can do. And so this is kind of linked down here. Also mentioned that they already have partners lined up for 2027 and beyond that are excited. Ooh, okay, so that likely means DC. If you've talked to Marvel, DC is in the line. If you've talked fantasy IPs, if you've talked Lord of the Rings, if we think about the big fantasy books of our time, I'm thinking, Robert Jordan's works in the Wheel of Time. I'm thinking, past that, we're thinking, oh my God, like the Stormlight archives, all that stuff. Like, there is a lot to really break down, and I want to approach that in the latter half of the video, because part of what informs us on good Universes Beyond product, and that might feel like a weird statement to make, but ultimately Universes Beyond is here to stay. We've established this in a couple of videos. The key that I want to do with my videos, right, kind of moving forward, is highlight how we can do Universes Beyond properly. There are IPs that will really resonate with the Magic player base in general and invoke a kind of positive reaction in some way to these. People have quoted this with Star Trek, at least. A lot of people are excited for Star Trek, but people have said this about Star Wars. People have said this about other game IPs. And I think We are really early in the days of Universes Beyond as to what is successful, and we have only seen a recent implementation of this from a full holistic Magic perspective, standard legal. We've seen Universes Beyond be implemented from a secret layer. We've seen them then next step up be Eternal Magic legal, so Pauper, Vintage, Legacy, and primarily Commander, and then now we are starting to see that come up in standard. So we are gaining data points as to what is going to resonate with the community, how the implementation of that IP is going to resonate better versus worse. And we see that with something like Spider-Man and Pick 2 Draft. Recently, actually, as the recording of this video, I was just watching a Jim Davis video about how the implementation of Spider-Man has actually been tanking his Bronze to Mythic channel, because not only is the Pick 2 Draft format poorly implemented in terms of like winning a whole draft doesn't actually get you up a pip, so it's hard to kind of rank up, but people are just watching it less and the format just isn't that deep. So again, I don't need to play Pick 2 Draft. The pros are telling you they don't want to play Pick 2 Draft, and it's just not working out for them in terms of multiple metrics. So we can tell that the Spider-Man set, and likely the way TMNT is going to be brought out, likely will not be a good option. I have people on TikTok telling me that, oh, you don't think there's enough material for TMNT? You've never watched it, you don't know what you're talking about. There is more material for Spider-Man than TMNT could ever dream of, and Spider-Man flopped. Don't act like TMNT is going to be any level of a successful set. Let's be completely honest with ourselves. But what will be successful is, as we saw with Lord of the Rings being fantasy adjacent and Final Fantasy having high fantasy elements and multiple games being a strategy-based game, kind of the Venn diagram of people that play strategy-based games and play Magic the Gathering kind of overlapping in a big way. These are the type of patterns we start to see that can inform us as to what Wizards of the Coast believes will be successful and what we believe can be successful as a future Universes Beyond IP. Right now, it seems like the big talk of the town is K-pop Demon Hunters, because recently we got this reported that K-pop Demon Hunters toys, figures, and games are coming as Netflix announces co-master deals with both Mattel and Hasbro. Now, does this mean that this is a full K-pop Demon Hunter set? Maybe, because the movie was so successful. It was the most watched movie on Netflix. It beat out so many records in previous shows and everything. So you can imagine a sequel and or a trilogy of movies is coming. And the reason I mentioned a trilogy is everything feels like a trilogy these days. Everything has like a part 1, part 2. Everything is drawn out, which is kind of frustrating, right? And maybe there's not enough material now. If you were to just do one movie, you could turn that into a secret layer or like a group of. But if you were to transform this into a sequel and or a trilogy series, then you could build this out into a full set. And the reason I'm focusing on this is we know from the earnings call earlier this year when they talked about how Final Fantasy made $6 million in one day and Lord of the Rings did that in 6 months. They also want to collaborate with many people, and they already are open to things like K-pop. This is K-pop Demon Hunters that came after and was widely successful. This is probably happening in 2027, right? They probably have a deal working with Netflix right now where Netflix is probably working on a second movie, maybe even a third movie to come out maybe later next year and everything, right? Like, or early in 2027, and the release of this set might line with this. And so this is actually a very strategic move for Hasbro as a prediction for myself. We have no confirmation of any of this, but I'm predicting this as a strategic move because then you can stay on the pulse with it. A lot of times when it comes to development of cards from Wizards of the Coast, we know that the timeline is approximately 2 to 3 years in advance. So it's hard for them to stay current with things, to make current iterations of Spider-Man that might be coming out now, or stuff like with the Ultimate Universe in DC, like if they go down the line of DC, they still have time for that. But it's hard for them to stay up to date and current. But this could be a strategic way that they take advantage of something that's happening now, and it aligns with some of the goals that they've already outlined to make something in the future. So something I definitely wanted to point out there. I got to shout out the latest BDE games shit posting here. Corporate needs to find the difference. You got the prop saying it's the same goddamn photo. We've done the whole Fortnite joke for a while. This is in response to the Saffron Olive tweets. I had to point it out just as a haha funny. But during the earning call today, Hasbro CEO Chris Cocks believes that there will be at least one Universes Beyond set next year that will match and or beat Final Fantasy. And based on what we have in terms of the lineup, this is actually from the summary done by, I don't want to misquote his name again, but Mike Preventure here. So if you go into this article, this is where I got this visual. But these are the sets that we have: Lorwyn, TMNT, Secrets, Superheroes, Hobbit, Reality Fracture, and Star Trek. My prediction for this is that it is either going to be The Hobbit or Star Trek. I think the Marvel superhero set has the potential for it, but I think even now, based on their feelings of how it went with Spider-Man and the metrics and the feedback that they're getting, they don't believe like Marvel superheroes will be equal to Final Fantasy or better. I think they would believe it'll be successful. But the reason I believe that it's The Hobbit or Star Trek, so the Star Trek one I want to enable specifically because of the fact that this might be a long-term way to bring Star Wars in eventually when the Star Wars TCG fails, because I believe it will, just being honest. The Star Trek universe, he specifically mentions as being a nerd about and being excited about. So this is something that maybe he has more investment into. They put a lot of time and effort into. But more importantly, The Hobbit, I had my tinfoil hat theory about how they will likely reprint the One Ring or key cards from the Lord of the Rings set that are relatively expensive and reprint it into The Hobbit, because a lot of them actually still do exist in the Hobbit universe, but don't actually get mentioned in that way. For example, the One Ring isn't necessarily the One Ring in the Hobbit universe. It's not necessarily, it's Bilbo's ring. It's not brought about to be the super fantastical cornerstone artifact of that age in the Hobbit story. The Hobbit story is very kind of honed in on a specific adventure that doesn't necessarily have the wide-reaching effects on the bigger universe, although it does when you bring it into the context of the Lord of the Rings. But lore-wise aside, I don't think Wizards of the Coast cares about any of that. I think the One Ring gets reprinted in The Hobbit. I think it gets brought into Standard and Pioneer. I think it gets banned to all living crap in those formats, but it's a way to kind of bring down the price. We get Orcish Bowmasters. We get everything. We get like because Orcish Bowmasters, there may not be orcs with bows specifically. There may not be multiple groups of orcs with bows specifically. There probably are. There definitely is. What am I saying? Probably. I've read this material. They exist. It's in there, right? They exist in that world. We get reprints for all of these. We get new treatments, new commander product, all that stuff. I believe The Hobbit being fantasy adjacent is actually what is the next step for making it bigger and better than the Final Fantasy set. The problem is that's what I believe Wizards thinks. I personally do not believe any of these sets have what it takes to beat Final Fantasy. Hot take. I don't believe any of these sets do. I don't think Star Trek does it. If it is, I'm happy to be wrong. I think The Hobbit is closest, in my opinion, based on obviously the metrics that we have. Star Trek could come out of nowhere. I don't think the in-universe sets will do as well at all, because the price of secondary, the price of product is naturally higher to offset the price of licensing that's offset onto the consumer. That will make the sale per product much higher, and the scalpers will purchase these, especially with the Q3 hyping this up. People will be more hyped to purchase this product because Wizards of the Coast is anticipating it will sell higher. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So by that nature of the in-universe sets likely just being worth less in general per product, it will do worse. That is my buy numbers. If you sell some product, if you sell product A at $5 a piece and you sell product B at $6 a piece, assuming the numbers are about equal, the $6 a piece one will generally do better. And it's probably worse because it's not $5. It's product B being sold at like friggin' $8 to $9 a piece. It's much more. And so that's where I'd make that kind of comparison. But where this is important is we start to see a trend in the type of product that will likely do well in universes beyond. So with the Final Fantasy set, as I've already highlighted, we have multiple games. It is high fantasy. It is years of kind of development of lore. And also, one of the things that I believe the Command Zone actually brought up specifically, when it was the greatest induction of net new Final Fantasy art out there. So obviously, a lot of Final Fantasy fans are just going to go into it because they have new visualizations of cards and events within these games that they've never had before. So that's a really exciting part about it. So Final Fantasy has a lot of unique parts to it, but I think it has trends that lend to it being a successful set, albeit the sample size being very small. We can make predictions on this though. With that in mind, there are a couple of Universes Beyond IPs that I think we already have ideas as to why it will be implemented and why it will be successful. And I think 2027 and 2028 will really be a honing of what will be the purest form of Universes Beyond in the best way possible. I think Universes Beyond is going through a lot of stumbling right now. We will obviously be getting a Marvel set in 2027, but that doesn't mean we do not get sets that we, as a general Magic the Gathering consumer base of high fantasy and fantasy nerds, actually do want. Firstly, I want to point out that Brandon Sanderson was recently at Wizards of the Coast headquarters. Famous author Brandon Sanderson, I'm a big fan of him as a Wheel of Time nerd, as someone who's reading through the Stormlight archives right now. Already finished the first 3 of Mistborn. I'm a Brandon Sanderson lover. He was at Wizards HQ kind of talking about his favorite Magic sets. I'm going to link this down below. Now, we have had situations where Brandon Sanderson has been screwed over by Wizards before, but the fact that this was brought up recently means that some type of conversation is likely being had. I think we can put on our tinfoil hats and talk about this, especially because even long ago, way back 5 years ago, Brandon Sanderson, best-selling author, was on Game Nights. This is one of my favorite episodes of Game Nights. The fact that Brando Sando was on here, Big Sand himself was on here. Brandon Sanderson has been deep within Magic for a very long time. His love for the game is very clearly shown in this episode. I highly recommend you go watch it. His passion for this game is there. And so he wants to be involved with Magic the Gathering in some way, shape, or form, as long as he can find the time for it, because this man is writing books off the left, right, whatever wazoo. I think this means not only could we potentially get a Wheel of Time collaboration, I think this is actually probably least likely, if I'm going to be honest, just because obviously this is Robert Jordan. This is not Brandon Sanderson. He helped finish the series with kind of a Memory of Light and everything. He helped finish off in my opinion, the best fantasy series of all time. Hot take, I believe this series actually, for me, slightly edges out Lord of the Rings. Now, I think Lord of the Rings overall is a more concise story, so it's close for me. I think the Wheel of Time, just as a complete aside, has a lot of problems with it in terms of how like women are portrayed in some ways, how certain conflicts are laid out, how certain people's like human interactions are. It's just limits of the time, you know, the whole hair tugging and the presumed lesbianness of the time. Like, there was actually some progressive media happening in these book series. It's just, it had to be inferred because you couldn't write it at the time. All I'm saying is the power and the pure fantasy and the elements in this book series genuinely push it above Lord of the Rings for me. I will stand 10 toes on that. I personally subjectively believe the Wheel of Time is a better series than Lord of the Rings. So I believe this is possible, but again, likely not, because this is a Robert Jordan series that Brandon Sanderson helped finish. But then that also could mean Stormlight Archives. We know 5 books are already finished, and then I believe the lore is that 10 years later or 100 years later or something like that, in the lore, Brandon Sanderson is going to start his next 5 books, right? And so this is going to be a long, drawn-out series. A lot of people are very fond of it. A lot of great high fantasy lore. This is the type of book series, the type of fantasy series that really melds well with Magic the Gathering, and we see its influences in the fact that Wizards of the Coast is working with the authors right now. So could we get secret layers? Likely. Could we get a full set? Maybe. And I think it does match with the high fantasy element that Magic the Gathering already has and continues to portray, and we see kind of be successful in other Universes Beyond implementations. Lastly, I also want to bring up the fact that if we did Mistborn, goated, pure cinema. One of my favorite trilogies of all time. I like briefly started the second series, but then Stormlight finished. I was like, okay, no, I'm gonna start this. So no Stormlight spoilers in the comments, by the way. So far, not so bad. I'm only halfway through like book 1. It's okay. It's okay. I'm assuming it's going to pick up and get better. I trust the process. I'm going to read it. I'm not going to give up on it. I'm going to trust the process. A lot of y'all like it. I'm here for it. I'm going to trust the process. Now, I'm excited for this because the magic system, I think, really lends well to the combat focused elements of Magic the Gathering and a planeswalker using a book of spells and tricks at their hand. I think the combat system, the magic system, and the lore really do align with how Magic the Gathering and its current combat systems work. The instant speed nature of things, being able to interact in different ways. I really do think the Mistborn, especially the original high fantasy Victorian Gothic era Mistborn trilogy, really do work. I think the second series with the cowboy whodunit, like kind of mystery style of the second 4 books, maybe is a little too Outlaws of Thunder Junction. Maybe I'm taking that a little too literally, but I think the original Mistborn trilogy can work. Next up, we know that Miyazaki, creator of the Soul series, is a huge Magic the Gathering fan. We also know from this article from Hipsters Course years ago in 2022, talks about an interview concept artist Daisuke Satake described a tendency of Miyazaki's to reference old tabletop games, for example, of imagery to explain to the artist. Imagine Miyazaki with the binary of Magic cards pointing out this. Given Miyazaki is an avid Magic player, at least as of 2011, he may have done this with Magic cards too. Dark Souls, Hacker, and Modder, Zuli the Witch suggests that specific cards serve reference to this. Now, we don't have exact alignment on this. I believe some of this is like he said, she said, and some of this is kind of rumors, but we do know Miyazaki is big fans and has taken example from Magic adjacent, and I believe has anecdotally recently talked about how, especially with this article, how he's taken kind of inspiration from Magic cards. I believe if someone, like, the research isn't 100% there, it seems still pretty anecdotal, but it's there. Miyazaki has aligned with and or taken reference from Magic adjacent type of materials in high fantasy art. We know that Magic the Gathering is the biggest influx of new high fantasy art every single year. So of course, if you're going to take reference from any fantasy art, it's going to be Magic the Gathering. And so definitely Soul series could be a great secret lair and or a full set. I think the Dark Souls set, if you just called it Dark Souls, you can make reference to, you know, Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3. I think, like, you know, a lot of these games are so vague in terms of their story, they actually help. It doesn't feel like you're completely disillusioned from it. Like, you could call it like you can make, you know, the foul tarnished and all that stuff. Like, the main character that you play in these stories are just like a generic, almost nobody. And then the bosses could be great legendary creatures. I think the settings of them are fantastic. If you're talking about Bloodborne versus Sekiro versus Elden Ring versus the Dark Souls universes, there are so many fantastic elements to all of this, and I think this is another great way to take a fantasy series where an author or a great creator of said fantasy series takes inspiration from these sets all the time. I mean, if you take a look at this, right, the Millennia Bloom potentially taking reference from the Sun Petal Grove art, fantastic. Heat, absolute cinema. Absolute cinema. I love it. If this is actually confirmed inspiration, if we get Millennia's boss room as Sun Petal Grove, that's kind of elite. I'm not gonna, but I'm biased as a Souls fan, so just saying. So I think Dark Souls as a similar high fantasy, multiple games, a lot of materials to take from, and an author and a creator of the series that is very passionate about fantasy and Magic the Gathering, I think this could be a great collaboration for it. Finally, the last one that I really want to bring up is the Dune universe. I think, so Dune, just being like one of my favorite high fantasy series of all time, what's great about this, especially if you approach it from the movies itself, it's very high sci-fi, and I would actually compare it a lot to something along the lines of Edge of Eternities. I would really like, especially in terms of some ship designs and similar like that, like the idea of sandworms and everything, like it came from Dune. The sandworms, the large mega sandworms that you see in Magic the Gathering and all over fantasy, let's be honest, it's from stuff like this. It is largely taking inspiration, if not from other sources, but from Dune. And the high fantasy, high science, high sci-fi elements of something like Dune, I think, really lend to it. There's a lot of forget, you know, the fact of outside of the lore of of the main books. The stuff that the author's son wrote is a whole different discussion of whether or not that's canon or not. But I think the primary books really do have a lot of material that you can grab from. There's a lot of like weird concepts in it, which I think hold it back. But I think the primary Dune universe really do help with some of the strange body horror elements of it. And the reason I like the Dune universe specifically is because it really can bring back like distortions, strangeness, and just weird elements of body horror, as I mentioned, and strange creatures and like weird experimentations. The things that we see in something like Delver of Secrets, how it's a scientist going crazy to transform themselves and achieve perfection. These are the type of things that already exist in Magic the Gathering and honestly have not been explored in a large way for a very long time. And I think Dune is that perfect avenue into it. That idea of losing your mind, madness, achieve power, control. Like, I think these type of elements in a story like this really do work with Magic the Gathering, especially with the boomer heads of Magic the Gathering, where, you know, they always talk about how the lore used to be amazing, and the lore was amazing. If you talk about like the Urza and Brothers War time of things, a lot of those stories are similar, especially in their sci-fi high fantasy elements, to what Dune and a lot of older fantasy is like. It really is that similar, and I think a universe like Dune can really lend to that. And ultimately, that's where my discussion ends, taking a look at where Hasbro ultimately lands with their kind of Universes Beyond and how we can potentially inform what would actually be a good Universes Beyond set. What would actually be a great next step for Magic players. And honestly, after all this, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Let me know what you think about the ideas I kind of push forward. How are you thinking about the profitization of Wizards of the Coast and how they're pushing Universes Beyond? Is there a way for you to accept Universes Beyond if you are maybe on the fence or a hater? Do you feel like maybe a high fantasy implementation of this is much better than something like Rick Grimes and Transformers? If we were to go kind of continue down this angle of high fantasy, is that actually a better angle for you? Or are you just hating Universes Beyond in general?